محمد وعجل فرجهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن ربكم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش يغشي الليل النهار يطلبه حثيثا والشمس والقمر والنجوم مسخرات بأمره ألا له الخلق والأمر تبارك الله رب العالمين. صلوات بيجي محمد وآله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As mentioned, tonight is the 8th majlis on this series of majalis under this ayat of Surah Araf, ayat number 54, which I've been reciting for the past 7 nights, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by addressing and mentioning His sifat, that indeed your Rabb is someone who created the heavens and the earth in 6 phases, and then He established Himself upon it, the day and the night which follow each other, the moon, the sun, the stars, all are under His possession. And indeed, to Him belongs the creation, to Him belongs the command, and Tabarakallahu Rabbul Alameen. Blessed is He who's the Rabb of Alameen. Under the topic of Naqsh A'imma fi Ahya ad-Din, the role of Imams in reviving the religion. And if you remember, we began discussing some of those distortions that took place from the time of Rasulullah or towards the end of the life of Rasulullah, leading into the Khilafat of Khulafai Dhahiri, when they had all the opportunity in the world to take things in whichever direction they want. The distortion of the deen continued, and eventually the plot of the Umayyads was successful in what they wanted to achieve. And this prohibition or this continuation, and there were elements which paid and which added or aided rather to this movement. Tonight, inshallah, I will mention 2 of those elements that aided a great deal in the achievement of this plot. That how they were able to distort the teachings of Islam, and in front of that, the mubaraza, the fight and the struggle of Ma'sumin, what did they do to counter that? I gave a few examples last night as well. The individuals, aside from Ma'sumin, who played a vital role in the continuation of this madhab. If you look a little bit into the history, you'll find that the word Shia was always there. The word Ahl Sunnah came into being in the time of Amir Sham. So you're looking at the first 50 years of the Hijri calendar. There's no istilah and the terminology of Ahl Sunnah. This is a challenge. Go look. You won't find it anywhere. On the contrary, you find the word Shia. People were referred to as Shi'atu Ali, the party of Ali, the clan of Ali, the group of Ali. These were different names that were given. Even from the time right after the wafat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the whole incident of bringing the fire to the house of Janab Zahra is what? They said, you're conspiring in the house. The party of Ali is conspiring in the house. And so from there, the word Shia was there. The word Shia has appeared in Quran in the meaning of follower. We mentioned the mushayi'at, the following, putting your steps in the steps of Ma'sumin is called mushayi'at. And that's where the word Shia emerges. The one who follows. Allah refers to in Quran, إِنَّهُ مِنْ شِيَّتِهِ لَإِبْرَاهِيمَ. From the Shia of Hazrat Nuh is who? Ibrahim is called the Shia of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. That means he's the follower of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu. إِنَّهُ مِنْ شِيَّتِهِ لَإِبْرَاهِيمَ. And the group of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala divides. There are two groups of people. One is the Shia of Musa, the other is the Aduv of Musa. So even in Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the Shia of a Nabi, the opposite to the Shia of Nabi is the enemy of the Nabi. Ayat of Quran is there. My memory does not serve me well, otherwise I'll read the ayat for you. But Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, the whole story of him, when he grew up in the land of Misr, and then that first exposure where he knocks someone dead, hits him in the face, the story is mentioned, and then it was told that he is from the Shia of Musa. And the rest were the Aduv of Musa, the enemy of Musa. So the word Shia is used over there as well. So of course, over there, it's in the terminology of the meaning of the word in its literal sense, which is the follower. And that's what we are. We claim to be the follower of Ali ibn Abi Talib. With that said, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So you don't find the mention of the word Ahl Sunnah up until the time of Amir Sham. He's the one who established, in fact, in his time, initially it was called Shia Ali or Shia Muawiyah. That was the initial terminology. Even then, the word Sunni has not appeared yet. The word Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah came into introduction at that time to separate from the Shi'an Ali. Remember the story of Hakaman when after the battle of Siffin, there were groups who said neither one, Muawiyah or Ali, should be the ruler, and the story of the Kharijis. At that point, this terminology comes into existence. So here, the point that I'm trying to establish with this muqaddimah is that what were the elements that were deployed to go ahead and distort this religion? And when did it begin, really? If I can say it in one sentence, it began actually from the time Rasulullah was on his deathbed. Really, the seed was planted at that time. Of course, for the youngsters over here, just a reminder for them, that there's a hadith called Hadith Qirtas, the hadith of the pen. Rasulullah is on his deathbed, last few moments of his life. He asks, the ladies are behind the curtain, the men are on this side, there are ashab over here as well. And Rasulullah in the midst of that asks to bring him a pen and a paper so that he will write something by which you will not go astray. أَكْتُبْ لَكُمْ شَيْئًا لَن تَضِلُّوا بَعْدِي. So that I may write something for you by which you will not go astray. And this is where one of the wives of the Prophet, standing behind the curtain, said, fulfill the demand of Rasulullah. And you know the story. Second Khalifa stood up. He said, we have Quran between us. And of course, this man is under the pain and the illness and the sickness that he's suffering from. And therefore, Quran is enough for us, and hasbuna kitabullah. The book of Allah is enough for us. The mere utterance of the word, the book of Allah is enough for us, is something which is itself shows lack of understanding. So even today, if someone says, Quran is enough for us, they're misleading. And if you study the history of Islam, you'll see that even Quran actually served, if when it was in the hands of untrustworthy people, it served the opposite purpose. In the Battle of Siffin, people raised Quran on the spears. What did it do to them? It misled them. Instead of joining Amirul Mu'mineen and sticking with him, they left saying, how do we fight with someone who's raising Quran? So here, the first seed is being planted. So the first question that we have on hand that we want to address is the situation of the word that is uttered, Hasbuna Kitabullah. The book of Allah is enough for us. This sentence itself, as I mentioned, is very difficult to prove. Just take one aspect from Quran, Salat. Take Salat from Quran, which is the most fundamental and the basic obligation on any Muslim. The first thing that we start teaching our kids, after the basics of Tawheed and Adalat and whatnot, the Usul ad-Din, after the first thing in Furu ad-Din that they learn how to do is namaz. You can't prove by saying Hasbuna Kitabullah, namaz from Quran. Because nowhere does it say how to pray in Quran. All it says in Quran, Aqim as-salat, Yuqimun as-salat, Aqam as-salat, and the other conjugatives of this verb Aqima. Nowhere does it say you stand up, you do takbiratul ihram, you make the niyat, you recite the qaraat, you do the ruku, you do the sujood, tashahhud, salam. These 11 wajibat that we have, 5 of them are rukn, 6 of them are ghairi rukn. When I ask my students, can you count the wajibat in namaz? They start out counting. Everybody is able to count the first 9. And then the 10 and 11 is where people get stuck. Let's see how we serve over here. First is, you got the niyat, you got takbiratul ihram, you have the qira'at, the 2 surahs, you have the ruku', you have so before ruku' you can do qiyam, number 5, then you have the 2 sujood, then you have the tashahhud, you have the salam, you have the dhikr. So these are 9. 5 here, 4 here. What are the 2 left? Tartib and muwalat. These are also 2. So what is tartib and muwalat? All we've heard of When do we do tartib? When do we do muwalat? What are these? Tartib is the sequence of events. How you do qiraat first, then you do ruku, then you do sujood. You don't do qiraat, then sajda, then ruku. This is called tartib. And muwalat is not putting too much gap between each of these objects. Continuation of your salah. So that a person who looks at you praying does not think that this person, is he praying or is he doing something else? That is called muwalat. These are the 11 wajibat. You cannot prove these 11 from Quran. So the mere statement, hasbuna kitabullah, is something which is false in its own. So the first element of distortion of the madhab is what? So I said I'll mention two concepts and two elements today. The first was the prohibition of narrating the tradition of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because if you ban the tradition of the Prophet, then how are you going to learn salat? So they came to an agreement later on. They said, we'll only allow those ahadith of Rasul which are pertaining to ibadat to be narrated. That was the only exception that was given. While we look at the recommendation from the Prophet in his lifetime, so much emphasis that Prophet laid upon the fact that you should go ahead and narrate. He said, Naddarallahu abdan sami'a maqalati. Allah is happy, joyful about that abd, that servant of mine who hears my maqala, my qawl, فَوَعَاهَا وَبَلَّغَهَا مَنْ لَمْ يَسْمَعْهَا. Protects it and then narrates it to the someone who did not hear me. So if you heard me, you take this qawl, you protect it, and then you go ahead and transfer it to someone else. What does Allah do to this person? Naddarallahu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy and satisfied and razi with such an individual. So that's number one. Then he says, Man adda ila ummati hadithan. Whoever transfers a hadith to my ummat, tuqamu bihi sunnatun, by which a sunnat is established. And then, wa tuthallimu bihi bid'atun. And a bid'at is gotten rid of, falahul jannah. So if a person narrates a hadith of me, through which an ibadat is performed, an act of worship is done, a sunnat is established, and a bid'at is gotten rid of, that person has what? Deserves jannat. Rasulullah said many such things regarding narrating the hadith. He said, Man ta'allama hadithan or hadithain, whoever learns two hadiths, yanfa'u bihima nafsahu, he benefits it himself from those ahadith, wa yu'allimuhuma ghayrahu, and teaches others with that as well. فَيَنْتَفِعَ بِهِمَا كَانَ خَيْرًا مِنْ إِبَادَةٍ سِتِّينَ سَنَةً. Two ahadith. If any one of my members or my ummat memorizes two ahadith and then narrates those two ahadith to someone else who benefit from it, you benefit yourself, and then others also benefited from that hadith, what happens? This is better than the ibadat of 60 years. So all these comparisons that are done, you say, well, a lot of these riwayat we hear is that tafakkuru sa'atin afdalu min ibad matlan sab'ina sana. Contemplation for 1 hour is better than 70 years. These 70 years or these 60 years that is told sometimes seems like exaggeration. This might come to your mind. While it may seem like exaggeration, but don't take it for granted. Here it literally means what they're saying. Because the Prophet of Islam and Ma'asumeen alayhimu salatu wasalam, when they say something, even if it seems like exaggeration, they're not exaggerating. When Rasulullah says to turn the sun back, when he's able to point at the moon and break it into half, these things are not exaggeration. When they performed these acts and they showed such miracles, then when they refer that, go ahead and memorize the hadith or tell someone else through which you will gain the thawab of this much, don't think that this is No, it's exaggeration. If anything that this hadith or these sort of ahadith is doing is what? Is giving us incentive to go ahead and take heed. Unfortunately, human psychology, especially men, that they need incentives to do something good. Without incentive, you don't see much good is being done. And I excluded the women out of it, because in them this ability exists. Even for men, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to lure them with incentives in the paradise so that they could do something good here. So much incentive is given in Quran to men. And you don't find that incentive given to the women. Primarily because they need this incentive to go ahead and do even the smallest of the good. And when they do something good, that's something when they remain and remember it forever. And that's, again, I guess the psychology of both genders. That when you do something good, you remember it like it was yesterday. And when you have done something wrong, you forget it as if it was 100 years ago. You ask me, Maulana, what did you do today? Good deeds. I'll start counting. Oh, I woke up for Fajr. Before that, I woke up for this. I did Namaz al-Shab, for example. I attended Majlis. I took care of kids. I did all these things. Maybe I might not even have enough time to count all the good deeds I've done all day long. And then you turn and say, Maulana, anything wrong, haram, bad you did today? We are humans, so there are mistakes, but I can't really recall anything bad that I did today. With absolute ajizi and inkisari, I might even say I did not do anything wrong today. Because who was there to watch? Who was there to see? But when it came to good, you asked me, I right away narrated 100 things. And that one good that I did, I'll remember it forever. But that one bad I did, I'll try to forget it as soon as possible. This is called what? Hubbi dhat. Love for the self. Nobody wants any negativity associated with them. Do you want anything negative associated with you? When you get famous, you hear good pros and cons, positives and negatives. Even they're trying to stay away from negative. You say, well, you're in the midst of people. People will criticize you, so learn to live with it. Let them criticize. Don't take it personal. But we don't want any negativity associated with us. That's human tendency from the childhood up until the time when we are all grown up. Before I digress from my message and my discussion, let me come back. So all these traditions are suggesting what? They're suggesting, make sure that you do not abandon my hadith. The value of my hadith is equal to the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed. The way Quran is hujjat upon you, my hadith is also hujjat upon you. You can't even prove 2 rakat namaz without looking at my sunnat and my tradition. And that's why I leave behind you 2 weighty things, not 1, 2 weighty things. Make sure that you hold on to both of them. When Rasulullah wanted to go ahead and write something, he was denied. When he said that I leave behind 2 things, people did not believe in him either. So that's the first thing that you find. Rasulullah went to the extent, he says, Qayyidul ilma bil kitab. Not only just memorize, no, document this, write it down if you have to, lest you lose the information that I'm inculcating at the moment to you. This knowledge is very, very vital for your existence. So don't let go of it. Qayyidul ilma bil kitab. Write it down if you have to, because you might forget it tomorrow. How is it that we forget things? Write it down so that you don't forget. So from Prophet, this concept is there. Now what is the counter that the machinery of Banu Umayyah and the Khulafa that they come into power? What is the argument against it? They began by saying, so the seed was planted in the time of Rasulullah. Now Rasulullah's wafat takes place. All the allegiances and everything takes place. And this hukm is being given. The first Khalifa, he ascends onto the member of Rasulullah. He speaks to the nation, just like your president, when he's elected, he likes to address the nation. Khalifa Awwal addresses the nation. In his first address to the nation, he says that many of you may have heard Rasulullah say a few things. Many of you remember the words of Rasulullah. And because your words might conflict with one another, because one person might have heard it one way, the other might have heard it the other way, and there might be conflict between the two, which will cause further conflict for the upcoming nations and our generations to come. Therefore, it is strongly condemned and prohibited for anyone to go ahead and narrate anything from Rasulullah. You're not allowed to. Of course, in the time of the first Khalifa, you got everyone who has seen Rasulullah. Well, according to their criteria, everybody is Sahabi at that moment. Regardless of their status of being mu'min or munafiq, they're all Sahabi at the moment. But this is the first address that makes sure that you don't do it. We have the book of Allah with us. We'll deduce halal and haram from it. We don't need to refer to the tradition of the Prophet. I want to take you deeper into it so that you understand the effects of this prohibition. Sunan Darimi, Ibn Majah, and Dahabi. They narrate this riwayat. There's a person by the name Qurza ibn Ka'ab. He was appointed as the governor or wali or the caretaker of Iraq at that time, in the time of second caliph. Second caliph walked with him to some distance when he was bidding farewell to him when he was traveling to Iraq. And then when time came, he said, this is where we part. You go on carry on with your duties and Godspeed and all that stuff. And then he asked him, do you know why I came with you? He said, to honor me. Urza ibn Ka'ab said, maybe to honor me. You're honoring me with your company. You're Khalifatul Muslimin. He said, yeah, that too. But also I wanted to tell you that you're going to a land where people recite Quran. They sound like the buzzing of bees, which means a good thing. It was a praise. When they recite Quran, it's so beautiful. It's like the buzzing of the bees. Don't narrate anything from the hadith of Rasul, lest you will diverge them from reciting of the Quran. He said, nothing? He said, nothing. He said, I'm going to a land which did not see Prophet in person. They might ask questions regarding Prophet. He said, that's nothing wrong with it. But if they ask anything pertaining to ibadat, it's okay. Aside from ibadat, don't mention anything. I gave you the names of 3 important books. Ibn Majah, one of the Sihah, Dahabi, and Sunan Darimi. All 3 narrate this tradition. This is censorship at its peak. We know about censorship. We live in the world where we have these news outlets, where the news is filtered through them before it makes way to the public. And they want to shape your thinking and mindset so you think only in this direction. They don't want you to be thinking in that direction, thinking outside of the box. And therefore, the news is filtered, and there's a lot of censorship that is done as far as how the news is delivered to you. So it didn't end there. It actually continued even after that. Some muhaddithin, of course, you couldn't stop them from writing a hadith. So hadiths that we have reached, a lot of people continue to write because there wasn't really any surveillance to go out and check upon people. So there were still people on occasions writing things on whatever they found. They didn't have paper at that time, so they wrote it on the back of, for example, animal skin. They wrote it on, for example, wood. Different things that they found, they will write the hadith upon them. So the second caliph, he ascends on the minbar and he says, I know many of you have heard from Rasulullah and saved the traditions of Rasulullah. We want to gather all the traditions of Rasulullah so that we can take out that which might be contradictory and present it. People brought whatever they had in their houses, whether it was written on the animal skin or on the back of a tree or whatever the case was. They brought all of these parches, whatever it was, to the Khalifa. the riwayat mentions in Tabaqat Kubra, Ibn Sa'd writes this. He burned all of those things. He burned everything. And then when people ask, what did you do? This was, handwritten, the words of Rasulullah. It had value. He said it would have caused conflict between you and even future generations would have been, misled because of these words. Therefore, it is for the betterment of the society that we destroy this. Then, of course, when people questioned a great deal, they said, you have the permission to narrate only the ahadith which are pertaining to ibadat. What is the purpose behind barring and banning all of this? Because amongst them you find ahadith such as Hubbu Ali, Iman, wa Bughzuhu Kufr. Love of Ali is Iman and hatred of Ali is Kufr. Aliyun Qasimun Nare wal Jannah. Ali is the one who decides who goes to Jannat and who goes to Jahannam. Whenever you want to see the one who is a mu'min, mention the name of Ali and you will find if that person is mu'min. But if you see that person's face complexion changes, you will be able to identify a munafiq from a mu'min. Such ahadith existed. And then when these sort of ahadith did make their way out to the public, they started questioning. So how do you go ahead and say that Aliyun Qasimun Nar wal Jannah? How is Ali going to divide Jahannam and Jannat? Is it in his hands? He said, no, Allah is still Rabb. But this is merely saying, Imam Shafi comes into defense. He said, this is merely saying what? That Ali is the one who divides Jannat and Jahannam, that who gets to go to Jannat and who gets to go to Jahannam? He gives a dalil behind it. He said, have you not heard another tradition from the Prophet who said, Hubbuhu Iman? He said, yes. Hubbu Ali is Iman. Have you not heard from Prophet who said, Bughzuhu Kufr? Keeping hatred and animosity towards him is kufr. He said, yes, that's we agree upon. There's no doubt about that. But this is where we have issue. He said, then what do you have remaining? Who gets to go to Jannat? Is it mu'min or is it kafir? He said, mu'min goes to Jannat. Who goes to Jahannam? Is it kafir or a mu'min? He said, kafir goes to the Jahannam. He said, then it is clear the one who loves Ali ibn Abi Talib is considered to be a mu'min. Ali thus becomes qasimun nare wal jannah. Salawat bi Muhammad. So from here you understand that this is one of the reasons to go ahead and ban the writing of ahadith. Now there were people, as I mentioned, who wouldn't stop at any cost. Amongst them is a person by the name Abu Dhar. Abu Dhar was mard mu'min. He will continue to say haqq regardless of what. Once he performed Hajj, he was sitting by Jumratul Wusta when you go for Rami Jamarat. And he was sitting there, people gathered, seeing the senior Sahabi of Rasul. They gathered around him. They started asking him questions. They asked him question and a person came. He said, is it not made forbidden upon you to narrate the tradition of the Prophet? Abu Dhar pointed that sword this man had. And then he said, if you put the sword on my neck right here, and if I knew there was enough time for me to say one word from the hadith of Rasulullah before you will strike my neck, I will go ahead and say that word. If I had just that much time, knowing how long does it take for you to swing your sword, that much time if I had to go ahead and narrate the hadith of Rasul, I will not waste that moment, that instance, that second, that moment that you will allow me. Are you made ma'mur upon me to stop me from doing so? So nobody could stop him. So eventually the third caliph, he sent him to Sham. And he stayed in Sham. But he did not stop from doing what he was doing in Medina. He continued to narrate. In fact, this man, Ahnaf, he said, I entered into the masjid. And I saw this old man, whenever he went to a corner, people would run away from there. If he got up and he went to another corner, people would run away from there. I said, what is going on? This old man, he's going to different corners. Whenever he stands up and goes to another corner, people run away from that place. Why? So I approached that man. I came up to him. Ahnaf ibn Qais said that. He said, I went up to him and I said to him, who are you? That man responded by saying, who are you? He said, my name is Ahnaf. ibn Qais. He said, you don't want to be hanging around me. The longer you hang around me, the longer your life is at stake. He said, why are these people running away? He said, because the government has said whoever sits next to Abu Dhar will be persecuted. So in whichever corner I go to, wherever I get up to go to, people, instead of coming and gathering around me, they disperse, they go away. He said, why? And of course, the why was there because Abu Dhar would not stop from narrating the hadith. To the extent that Muawiyah sent a lot of money to the doorstep of Abu Dhar. This man delivered the money. Abu Dhar did not waste one moment. In the night time he spent and he gave all of that money as sadaqah. Did not use one dime for himself. In the morning, this man was sent back. Go take the money back from him because nothing can buy Abu Dhar. And then he wrote a letter. Amir Sham wrote a letter to Uthman. If you need Sham for your political gains, then get rid of Abu Dhar from here. If the longer he stays over here, the more trouble there will be for your own government. So he says, okay, fine, send him back. Abu Dhar now comes back to Medina. He comes back. How is he sent back? This is where tragedies. He's sent back on a camel without any saddle. The long distance from Sham to Medina on a camel without any saddle. And that camel was also made to go as quick as possible without stopping at any place. These are the words of Riwayat in Tabaqat Kubra. As fast as is possible to reach Medina without any stoppages. It mentions that at the time Abu Dhar arrived, the part of his flesh and meat was coming off of his body because of course, sitting on this rough ride that he had. So he arrives in the court of Khalifa. He's standing there. One of the companions, one of the friends of Khalifa by the name of Abdul Rahman ibn Auf had passed away. His wealth was being distributed. Ka'b al-Ahbar is there. Khalifa asks him a question and he says, Abdul Rahman was a good man. He gave a lot of sadaqah. He took care of the relatives. He took care of the poor. And Ka'b al-Ahbar agreed. He said, yes, that's true. Abu Dhar, in his old age, with the asa that he had in his hand, he struck Ka'b al-Ahbar and said, you're lying. The ayat of Quran says that those who accumulate the wealth in their life, وَالَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ وَلَا يُنْفِقُونَها فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَبَشِّرْهُمْ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. Those who accumulate and hoard the wealth and do not spend on the fuqara, according to the ayat of Quran, فَبَشِّرْهُمْ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. Go ahead and give them the glad tidings or the worst news that they will be sent into Adhab Alim. So Abu Dhar was then eventually sent to this place called Rabza, where nobody would be there to hear him, no one would go ahead and see him, and eventually his death takes place. But this Mard Mu'min, he gave his life just so that he can continue to narrate the hadith. Second example is Mitham Tammar. Mitham Tammar, who also died just few days prior to Karbala. He was thrown into the same prison as Mukhtar Thaqafi. That's another reason why Mukhtar could not join Karbala, because he was thrown into prison just prior to the events of Karbala by Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad then releases Mitham Tammar. He comes to the court. Ibn Ziyad says that why do you speak so highly of Ali? Let go of the wilayat of Ali. He said, what is it that I have aside from the wilayat of Ali? Give me a better imam, I'll go ahead and praise that imam. But when there isn't anyone better, then who do you want me to praise? He said, my Ali. He said, what would you do if I don't do it? Ibn Ziyad said, we'll kill you. He said, my Mawla has already told me that you will be the one killing me, tying my hands and cutting my tongue off. Ali is so right. Ibn Ziyad said, I'll prove Ali wrong. I won't kill you in that fashion, how Ali has said it. Go ahead and hang this man, cut off his hands, tie him up, but don't cut off his tongue. So they go ahead and hang Mitham like that. And right after Mitham started speaking, he started narrating hadith. He started speaking about the fadail of Amirul Mu'mineen. As he was hanging, he's speaking about the fadail of Amirul Mu'mineen. Hundreds of people gather. The news reaches Ibn Ziyad. He said, go ahead and cut off the tongue of Mitham Ammar. Why was he persecuted like this? Because he was also narrating the hadith. These are some of the examples that we find as far as the prohibition of narrating the hadith is concerned. This silsila continued for 100 years. The year 100 after Hijrah is when you find Khalifa Umawi, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, who comes, who lifts the ban on the prohibition of hadith. In fact, he says and writes to the people of Medina, whatever it is that you remember from Rasulullah, write us so that we can go ahead and document this. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this became a big reason in the distortion of religion. One of the main reasons as far as the tahrif is concerned, you find sometimes that as to how these people are so far away. The reason is because of this tahrif and this distortion that had taken place in the time of the first few khulafa. And then of course, they know that every time a Nabi, a previous nation, a Nabi whose people would start distorting from the haqq, Allah will send another Nabi. Then when that Nabi leaves, Allah will send another Nabi. When that Nabi leaves, Allah will send another Nabi to keep people on the right path. But this is the Khatimul Anbiya. This is the seal of Anbiya. No Nabi is coming afterwards. So what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to fix the problem of this ummah. If it has to be through the sulh of Imam Hassan, if it has to be through the shahadat of Imam Hussain, if it has to be through the du'as of Imam Zain al-Abidin, if it has to be through the ta'alimat of Imam Baqir and Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, if it has to be through the imprisonment of Imam Musa Kazim, if it has to be through the vilayat ahdi of Imam Rada, if it has to be through the ghaibat of Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi Ajjalallahu ta'ala faraju sharif. So that's as far as the first element of the distortion and the tahrif of religion. Of course, if I get into the second one, it'll take another half hour from your time, and I don't want to do injustice to that second discussion. But to keep you interested in it, the second element of, the element of the distortion and the tahrif in the madhab was devaluing the credibility of Rasulullah. I will mention tomorrow, God willing, in front of you, those conflicting words from their own books, one section after another, which was doing what? Which was devaluing the credibility of Rasulullah for the future people to come. So when they look at the hadith of Rasul, they'll doubt. That's why the machinery of Banu Umayyah were able to say anything they wanted in regards to Muawiyah, and nobody will catch them. Anything in regards to Yazid, and nobody will bother. Here, last night we had talked about another thing, and I wanted to touch upon that, and that is the ilm of Imam. We mentioned that Imam has access to ilm ghaib. Imam is ma'soom. And there are elements within our own madhab nowadays who are attacking this very institution, who are attacking that Imams are not masoom, only Allah is masoom. Imams don't have necessarily access to ilm ghaib. If anything that they have access to, you and I can also refine our souls to that extent, and we can gain access to that. And the reason they're giving is because if Imam is masoom and he has the knowledge of the ghaib, then how could he be a role model for us? And the way they attack this is interesting. He said that if Imam knows what's coming, how is that going to be difficult? If Amir al-Mu'mineen knows by sleeping on the bed of Rasulullah, and Rasulullah tells him, "Oh Ali, sleep on my bed, and after this, you will hand over the amanat to people, and then you'll take fawatim, and you'll come and meet me." This sentence itself is telling you what? That, "Oh Ali, you'll survive. The swords of the kuffar won't kill you. Isn't that right? Isn't this what telling Rasulullah, Amirul Mu'mineen, that Ali, while you're sleeping on my bed, you'll be safe. Or other things such as Imam Hussain knowing what to expect in Karbala, what will happen, and how they had prior knowledge to all of this. How is it a skill if you know this already? So right away, this question arises. They go from this end. It's true. If I know something is going to happen like this and I'll come out unscathed, then nothing wrong, I'll go into it. What they miss out on the point is that while they have ilm ghaib and they know the outcome of the thing, it's the khulus that is there, the obedience that is there, that it is the Amr Mawla, and we are muti in front of Amr Mawla. It's the sincerity. Many times you and I know certain things, we'll still won't do it. Or we know certain things, we still go ahead and do it. We know it's harmful, we'll still go ahead and do it. How many examples are there? We know certain things are not good, we'll still go ahead and do it. We know the outcome of many things, yet we still refrain from it. Or we don't do it, or we do it. Either way, you can look at the example. The fact of the matter, Imam, with knowledge, is able to do something, he has the knowledge of it, in fact, makes it even difficult. If I know what is coming, جو آنے والا ہے, اس کے اوپر یہ ہوگا, تو اس سے تو مشکلات میں اور اضافہ ہو جاتا ہے. لیکن یہاں پہ ڈفرینشیشن ہوتی ہے امام کے اخلاص سے, کہ امام اس عمل کو اخلاص سے انجام دیتا ہے, اطاعت کامل سے انجام دیتا ہے. لہٰذا امام کی علم غیب پہ کوئی خدشہ نہیں لا سکتا. اگر آپ اس اخلاص کو دیکھیں اور اس اطاعت کو دیکھیں تو آپ کو مجسم اطاعت نظر آئے گی ابو الفضل العباس میں. آپ کو مجسم خلوص نظر آئے گا ابو الفضل العباس میں. یعنی عجب معاملہ ہے کہ حضرت عباس, ایک دفعہ تو انسان کے اندر کوئی قوت و طاقت نہیں ہے کچھ کام کرنے کی, تو اس کے پاس ایکسکیوز ہے. نہیں, آپ کے پاس ہے طاقت, لیکن آپ اس طاقت کو امام کے سائے میں رکھے ہوئے ہیں. ولید امام حسین کو بلاتا ہے مروان کے سامنے, اور مروان کہتا ہے کہ حسین کو یہاں سے مت جانے دینا. امام حسین کی آواز بلند ہوتی ہے, عباس داخل ہو جاتے ہیں, ہاتھ تلوار پہ ہے اور نگاہیں حسین کے چہرے پہ ہیں کہ اگر حکم ہوگا امام کا تو تلوار نکلے گی. عباس چاہیں تو نکال سکتے ہیں تلوار ادھر, لیکن نہیں, منتظر ہیں امام کے حکم کے. یہ ہے اطاعت کامل, یہ ہے اخلاص کامل. ہم اور آپ کے پاس بھی یہ بہت اپرچونٹیز آتی ہیں اطاعت کامل کی, اخلاص کی. امام وقت کے سامنے حاضر ہے امام, اس کے سامنے اطاعت کی بہت ساری مثالیں ہیں. وقت نہیں ہے, مصائب کی طرف میں آ چکا ہوں. کیا ہم اس اطاعت کاملہ کے اوپر پورے اترتے ہیں کہ نہیں؟ لیکن حضرت عباس اس ہستی کا نام ہے کہ جو مطیع امر مولا ہے. مولا اگر کہیں گے تو ہوگا, اگر منع کریں گے تو نہیں ہوگا. کون ہے حضرت عباس؟ ام البنین کے فرزند ہیں. سن 26 ہجری میں آپ کی ولادت ہوتی ہے. کربلا میں سن مبارک 34 برس کا ہے, اور شجاعت وہ جو امیر المؤمنین سے سیکھی ہے. ایک دفعہ جب امیر المؤمنین اس دنیا سے گزر رہے تھے, وفات امام کی شہادت سے کچھ تھوڑے دیر پہلے کی بات ہے, اس وقت حضرت عباس کو امام نے بلایا. جب کسی کے ہاتھ میں عباس کا ہاتھ نہ دیا نا, تو عباس نے گریہ کیا, اپنی ماں سے بولا. اس وقت سن کیا ہے حضرت عباس کا؟ 14 سال کا. ام البنین آتی ہیں, کہا مولا کیا میرے فرزند سے کوئی خطا ہوئی ہے کہ آپ نے سب کا ہاتھ تو حسن کے ہاتھ میں رکھا, عباس کا ہاتھ کسی کے ہاتھ میں نہ رکھا. بس امام نے کہا حسین ادھر آؤ. حسین کو بلایا اور عباس کے ہاتھ میں حسین کا ہاتھ رکھا, اور کہا اے حسین, اے عباس, عباس جان لو کہ تم میرے فرزند ہو اور حسین نبی کے فرزند ہیں. جب تک تم زندہ رہنا حسین پہ کوئی آنچ نہ آنے پائے. بس اسی وقت سے حضرت عباس کی زندگی کا ایک ہی مقصد ہے, امام حسین کی حفاظت. اور اس حفاظت کے ساتھ ساتھ وہ اطاعت کامل. بس جلدی جلدی گزروں، وہ وقت آ جاتا ہے، شب عاشور ہے، امام جائزہ لے رہے ہیں مختلف خیمہ گاہ کا. امام جب مختلف خیمہ گاہ سے گزرے تو ایک خیمے کے باہر سے امام کو گریے کی آواز آئی. یہ بہن ام کلثوم کا خیمہ تھا. امام گئے، بہن سے پوچھا کہ کیا مقصد ہے، کیا ریزن ہے، کس وجہ سے تمہیں رونا آ رہا ہے؟ ابھی شب عاشور، ایک دن کے لیے اور جنگ ٹل گئی ہے. عباس کو بھیج کے ان کو منع کر دیا ہے کہ کل جنگ شروع ہوگی. تو ایک دفعہ ام کلثوم یہ کہتی ہیں کہ اے بھیا، سب اپنی اپنی قربانیاں آمادہ کر رہے ہیں. کل بھابی فروا اپنی قربانی دیں گی حضرت قاسم کے ساتھ. ام لیلہ کے پاس قربانی موجود ہے علی اکبر کی. بہن زینب کے پاس قربانیاں موجود ہیں اون اور محمد کی. سب نے اپنے اپنی قربانیاں تیار کر لی ہیں، میرے پاس کوئی قربانی نہیں ہے. حضرت عباس نے یہ الفاظ سنے اور کہا اے بہن، کل تم مجھ کو قربان کر دینا بھیا کے اوپر. بس وہ دن آ گیا، روز عاشور کا وہ وقت پہنچتا ہے کہ جب امام ایک ایک کر کے لاشیں اٹھاتے رہے، اور جو لاشیں امام سے نہیں اٹھتے تھے حضرت عباس کی کمک سے وہ لاشیں اٹھائے جاتے تھے. وقت آیا کہ حضرت عباس نے امام سے اذن جہاد طلب کیا. امام اب تک حضرت عباس کو روکتے رہے، ادھر مدینے میں روکا، یہاں پہ جس حد تک ہو سکتا تھا روکتے رہے. اب جب حضرت عباس نے آ کے پوچھا تو امام کے پاس کوئی عذر نہیں ہے کہ کہیں مت جاؤ، نہ جانے کا کوئی عذر نہیں ہے، اور اگر جانے دیں تو جانتے ہیں کہ کیا ہونے والا ہے، کہ نقشہ ہی تبدیل ہو جائے گا اگر عباس مقتل میں اتر گئے. کیا کرے امام ادھر؟ اور عباس مطیع امر مولا ہے، مکمل اطاعت ہے امام کی. امام کی اجازت کے بغیر عباس کوئی قدم نہیں اٹھائے گا. یہ ہے فضیلت ابو الفضل العباس کی. بس ایک دفعہ امام نے کہا اے عباس، مقتل جانا چاہتے ہو جاؤ، لیکن اس سے پہلے یہ العطش کی جو آواز آ رہی ہے نا، خیمے سے جو بچوں کی گریے کی آواز آ رہی ہے نا، یہ کانوں میں آ کے لگتی ہے. عباس جاؤ، کچھ اگر ان کے لیے کر سکتے ہو پانی لے آؤ. تم تو جانتے ہو 3 دن سے بھوکے اور پیاسے ہیں. عباس نے یہ سننا تھا. ہو سکتا ہے عباس کے ذہن میں یہ ہو کہ مقتل جاؤں گا، جس طریقے سے اکبر نے اپنی شجاعت کے جوہر دکھائے، جس طریقے سے دیگر اصحاب نے اپنی شجاعت کے جوہر دکھائے، میں بھی جا کے اپنی شجاعت کے جوہر دکھاؤں گا. لیکن مولا نے مجھے دوسرا کام دیا ہے. یہاں پہ دوبارہ اطاعت حضرت عباس سامنے آتی ہے. مطیع ہیں، جنگجو ہیں، بہادر ہیں، لیکن بہادری وہی صحیح ہے کہ جو مولا کی اطاعت کے ساتھ ہو. حضرت عباس آتے ہیں. ایک دفعہ خیمہ گاہ سے سکینہ کو بلایا، یہ 4 سالہ بچی آتی ہے. کہا بیٹا وہ خشک مشکیزہ مجھ کو لا کے دے دو. سارے مشکیزے خشک تھے، جناب سکینہ نے مشکیزہ لا کے دے دیا. حضرت عباس نے کہا بس تھوڑی دیر میں تمہارے لیے پانی لاتا ہوں. جناب سکینہ نے تمام ننھے بچوں کو اکٹھا کیا، سب کے ہاتھ میں کوزے دے دیے، سب منتظر ہو گئے. کہا میرے چچا باوفا ہیں، میرے چچا جو وعدہ کرتے ہیں اس وعدے کو پورا کرتے ہیں، ہرگز اپنے وعدے کی خلافی نہیں کرتے، خلاف ورزی نہیں کرتے. انہوں نے وعدہ کیا ہے کہ پانی لے کے آئیں گے تو یقیناً پانی لے کے آئیں گے. بس ایک دفعہ حضرت عباس رخ کرتے ہیں فرات کا، پہنچتے ہیں فرات پہ کس مشکل کے ساتھ، لیکن عباس نے جس طریقے سے 4000 پہرہ داروں کو ہٹایا ہوگا، ایک مقتل میں روایت نہیں ملتی کہ عباس کے اوپر کوئی زخم آیا ہو. جوہر یہ تھے عباس کی شجاعت کے کہ 4000 کو ہٹا دیا لیکن عباس کے جسم پہ ایک زخم تک نہ آیا. یہ شجاعت تھی کہ جو عباس دکھانا چاہتے تھے. بس ایک دفعہ فرات پہ پہنچتے ہیں، اپنے سوار اپنے گھوڑے کو بھی چھوڑ دیا کہ جاؤ تم بھی اپنی پیاس بجھا لو۔ عباس نے خشک مشکیزے کو بھرا، فوراً سے مشکیزہ بھر گیا۔ عباس بغیر کسی وقت کے تأمل کیے ہوئے، ضائع کیے ہوئے گھوڑے کی طرف دیکھتے ہیں، لیکن بے زبان جانور نے بھی وفا دکھائی اور پانی نہ پیا، منہ پھیر لیا۔ ارے اس گھر کے جانور بھی ایسے ہوتے ہیں، ان کی وفا کی یہ مثالیں ہوتی ہیں، بے زبان ہے، پی لے پانی، تو بھی پیاسا ہے لیکن پانی نہ پیا۔ شاید رخ کیا ہوگا خیمے کی طرف، ابھی تک بچے پیاسے ہیں۔ اجرکم اللہ، خدا کسی غم میں نہ رلائے سوائے غم آل محمد کے۔ بس عباس نے مشکیزے کو اٹھایا، ایک ہاتھ سے علم کو بلند کیا، عباس چلے ہیں مقتل سے نکلتے ہوئے، خیمہ گاہ کا رخ کیا ہے فرات سے نکل کے۔ بس زندگی کا ایک مقصد رہ گیا، پانی کسی طریقے سے خیمہ پہنچ جائے۔ ادھر سے پسر سعد ملعون نے آواز دی کہ اگر یہ پانی پہنچ گیا تو جنگ کا نقشہ بدل جائے گا۔ 4000 کو تعینات کیا گیا کہ تیر اندازی کرے۔ آپ سوچئے، راوی کہتا ہے کہ اب عباس کو اپنے دفاع کی ضرورت نہیں تھی، جاتے وقت ایک زخم عباس کے جسم پہ نہیں ہے، لیکن اب مقصد دوسرا ہے، پانی کو بچانا ہے۔ عباس کی توجہ مبذول ہے صرف پانی کے اوپر۔ 4000 تیر انداز جب تیر پھینکیں گے، عباس کے جسم پہ کتنے لگے؟ اجرکم اللہ، خدا کسی غم میں نہ رلائے۔ بس یہ کہتے ہوئے عباس آگے بڑھتے ہیں، پانی کو سنبھالا ہوا ہے۔ ایک شخص آتا ہے، آ کے دائیں جانب سے ایسا وار کرتا ہے، کتف یمین عباس کا کٹ کے زمین پہ گرا۔ عباس نے پانی کو دوسرے ہاتھ میں لیا۔ انقطعتم یمینی انی احامی عن دینی، ارے اگر تم میرے سیدھے ہاتھ کو کاٹو گے میں تب بھی دین کی حمایت کرتا رہوں گا۔ بس ایک شقی نے دوسری طرف سے وار کیا، بایاں ہاتھ کٹ گیا۔ عباس نے مشکیزے کو گھوڑے کی پشت پہ رکھا، اپنے آپ کو جھکا دیا۔ مکمل طریقے سے اس مشکیزے کی حفاظت ہے، اس اسنا میں بھلے کتنے ہی تیر لگے ہو۔ اجرکم اللہ، بس عباس بڑھتے گئے۔ ایک وقت وہ آیا کہ ایک ایسا تیر ہے، ایسا تیر جفا جو آگے پیوست ہوتا ہے اس مشکیزے میں، سارا پانی بہتا ہے۔ عباس کی آس ٹوٹ گئی۔ عباس نے گھوڑے کو روک لیا۔ اب مقتل سے اب خیمہ جانے کی کوئی خواہش نہیں ہے۔ ارے پانی جو نہ رہا، عباس کس منہ سے جائے گا؟ بس یہ دشمن نے موقع پایا، عباس کے سر پہ ایسا گرز لگا کہ عباس زمین پہ اپنے گھوڑے پہ لڑکھڑانے لگے۔ ایک خطیب نے یہ واقعہ پڑھا کہ عباس زین سے زمین پہ آئے، جناب زہرا نے کہا خواب میں آ کے، اے خطیب تو نے انصاف نہیں کیا۔ کہا میں نے عباس کے مکمل مصائب پڑھے۔ کہا تو نے انصاف نہ کیا، اس لیے کہ جب بھی کوئی گھوڑے سے گرتا تھا اپنے ہاتھوں کے بلبوتے پہ، ارے میرے عباس کے بازو نہ تھے، سر کے بل گرا ہو۔ اجرکم اللہ، خدا کسی غم میں نہ رلائے سوائے غم آل محمد کے۔ بس وہ وقت آیا، عباس نے ایک دفعہ مولا کو آخری سلام بھیجا۔ السلام، بلایا نہیں، بس سلام بھیجا، السلام علیکہ یا ابا عبداللہ۔ امام نے یہ آواز سنی، عباس کی طرف دیکھا، زمین پہ گر گئے ہیں۔ امام جب کھڑے ہوئے کہا اپنی کمر پکڑ کے الان ان کا سرا ظہری وقلت حیلتی وشمت بی عدوی، عباس تمہارے جانے سے میری کمر ٹوٹ گئی، ارے اب کوئی حامی نہ رہا، اے عباس اب دشمن مجھے تانے دیں گے۔ بس عباس کی طرف بڑھتے ہیں، آئے ایک دفعہ حضرت عباس کے سر کو اٹھا کے اپنے زانوں پہ رکھا، منہ سے خون ہٹایا، محض گفتگو ہے، بھائی بھائی کی گفتگو، بس آخری جملے زحمت تمام، بھائی بھائی کی گفتگو۔ حضرت عباس ایک دفعہ وصیت کرتے ہیں، اے مولا میرے جنازے کو، میرے لاشے کو خیمہ نہ لے کے جائیے گا، اور میں کس طریقے سے اپنی شکل اپنی صورت ان بچوں کو دکھاؤں گا جو منتظر تھے پانی کے، اجرکم اللہ۔ امام نے دیکھا عباس کی وصیت کو پورا کیا، لیکن دیکھا بی بی گریہ گناہ ہے، اے عباس اب گریے کی کیا ضرورت ہے، تھوڑی دیر میں ساقی کوثر تمہیں سیراب کریں گے۔ عباس نے کہا مولا اس کی فکر نہیں ہے، جب میں زمین پہ آیا تو آپ لپک کے آئے، میرے کنارے آپ نے میرے سر کو اپنے زانوں پہ رکھا، تھوڑی دیر میں جب آپ زمین پہ آئیں گے تو کون آپ کے کنارے آئے گا، اجرکم اللہ۔ عباس کا یہ غم مہم ہے۔ امام نے علم اٹھایا، خیمے کی طرف بڑھنا شروع ہوئے، لوگوں نے دیکھا کہ علم آ رہا ہے، ننھی سکینہ جو کوزے لیے کھڑی تھی بچوں کی صف میں آگے بڑھی، میرے چچا واپس آ گئے، لیکن کیا دیکھا بابا آئے ہیں اور اب صرف اور صرف علم آیا ہے، عباس نہیں آئے۔ جناب سکینہ نے پوچھا این امی یا بچا، ارے میرے چچا کہاں ہے؟ امام نے فرمایا تمہارے چچا فرات کنارے سو گئے۔ کہا بچی نے مجھے پانی نہیں چاہیے، ارے میرے چچا کو لا دو۔ ماتم حسین